Most Christians today accept the theory of evolution. Let's take a look today at what the actual position is of most Christian communities concerning this question of evolution. I've touched on the topic of evolution several times during these videos, but I don't think I've ever quite covered it as closely as this. Now, I'm going to spend most of my time looking at the Roman Catholic position for several reasons. First, it's the largest single group of Christians. Second, it's the most centralized Christian body and is really the only one that can be said to have a single binding position on such questions. And third, it's the Christian community that's most firmly bound by dogma. Now, in recent times, say over the past 80 to 100 years or so, the Catholic Church has made several statements about evolution. Let's begin with a papal encyclical from 1950 by Pope Pius XII. He tentatively declares, "For these reasons, the teaching authority of the Church does not forbid that, in conformity with the present state of human sciences and sacred theology, research and discussions, on the part of men experienced in both fields, take place with regard to the doctrine of evolution, in as far as it inquires into the origin of the human body as coming from pre-existent and living matter, for the Catholic faith obliges us to hold that souls are immediately created by God." Now, this is a quite tentative statement, and it's paragraph 33 of quite a long document. "For these reasons" occupies basically the first 35 paragraphs, and it's rather long-winded and boring. It is, though, a first tentative step towards accepting the science, although there's still a fair way to go. For example, it refers to evolution erroneously as a doctrine. It also insists that this applies to the body only, not the soul. Now, in Catholic teaching, the soul is defined as the spiritual, immaterial, and immortal essence of a human being. It is considered the form of the body, meaning it gives life and individuality to the person, and this, they claim, is directly created by God. This is framed in very Aristotelian terms. But the soul, they argue, is what gives each individual his or her own unique identity, and this is directly created by God, even though the physical body that we bear may have arisen through the process of evolution. Regardless of these other details, it's okay, according to Pius XII anyway, to think that all the biological bits of human beings are subject to the laws and process of evolution, but not the soul. This is something distinct from the body and is not subject to evolution. In a 1996 message to the Pontifical Academy of Science on evolution, John Paul II went a little further. Today, he writes, more than half a century after the appearance of that encyclical, the one I've just quoted, some new findings lead us toward the recognition of evolution as more than an hypothesis. He speaks of the various theories of evolution rather than the single theory of evolution, the point being that while evolution itself is accepted as a genuine explanation for the emergence and development of life, there are various theoretical frameworks for understanding this, and the Church rejects some of these theories. So he goes on, as a result, the theories of evolution, which, because of the philosophies which inspire them, regard the spirit either as emerging from the forces of living matter or as a simple epiphenomenon of that matter, are incompatible with the truth about man. They are therefore unable to serve as the basis for the dignity of the human person. He distinguishes the observational sciences from the more philosophical, spiritual discussions of this. So, the sciences of observation describe and measure with ever greater precision the many manifestations of life and write them down along the timeline. But as soon as we get into the question of metaphysical knowledge, of self-consciousness and self-awareness, of moral conscience, of liberty, or of aesthetic and religious experience, these must be analysed through philosophical reflection. while theology seeks to clarify the ultimate meaning of the Creator's designs. A few years later, in 2014, when addressing the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, Pope Francis said, "God is not a demiurge or a magician, but the Creator who gives being to all entities. Evolution in nature is not opposed to the notion of creation, because evolution presupposes the creation of beings that evolve." So there's been quite a shift here in the last 80 years or so in the Catholic Church's position. And slowly they've come more to accept the scientific basis for evolution and argue that there's no conflict with faith except on a couple of key issues. There is one slight anomaly in the Catholic teaching which I think needs to be addressed, because as far as I can tell, the Church still wants to cling to the idea that there was in fact an original human pair. Benedict XVI, in several statements, affirmed that original sin and the theological concept of the fall presuppose a real first human pair. For him, the figure of Adam is more than a myth, representing a concrete reality about human nature and the relationship between humanity and God. As far as I'm aware, Francis has yet to make any statement on this matter. He's probably still trying to find a safe and sufficiently ambiguous way out of that mess. Moving on now to consider some of the other churches. The Anglican Church doesn't, as far as I'm aware, have any official position on evolution. It's less inclined to hand down dogma than the Catholic Church is. In general, though, it teaches that science and faith are not in conflict, and prominent figures in the Church, such as former Archbishop of Canterbury Rowan Williams, have publicly supported the view that evolution is compatible with Christian faith. For the most part, it's just not an issue for Anglicans. The Orthodox churches, again, are not inclined to be dogmatic on issues like this. Insofar as individual Orthodox theologians and thinkers have engaged with the topic, the general attitude within Orthodoxy tends to be one of openness to scientific inquiry, including evolutionary theory, provided it doesn't contradict core theological doctrines. Methodists are generally fine with it. Within the USA, Lutherans hold various positions. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America accepts evolution as compatible with Christian faith. On the other hand, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod officially rejects evolutionary theory. Baptists in the USA tend to be less centralized and therefore don't have a single position on the question of evolution. The Southern Baptist Convention generally rejects evolution. The American Baptist Churches of the USA is more open to scientific explanations of evolution and doesn't mandate the rejection of evolutionary theory. Theological diversity is encouraged, and many members find evolution compatible with Christian faith. And so on down to the more wacky literalist versions of Christianity, which of course will unequivocally reject evolution. I'll let you all fight it out amongst yourselves to determine which among you are real Christians and which are not, but it's clear that most people who identify as Christian are not required to reject evolution as the accepted means whereby life has arisen on this planet, including us. Of course, individuals within all of these different Christian communities and traditions will take their own position on this, even those that have a more top-down structure. I think it's interesting, given how this tends to be such a hot topic, particularly in the USA, how relatively uncontroversial this issue is throughout most of the Christian community. The Catholic Church still finds itself bound to certain doctrines concerning the soul and original sin, for which the science of evolution may provide some challenges. The Church is always slow to move on issues where science and faith appear to clash, but eventually it tends to shift while usually pretending not to. It always involves a little bit of sleight of hand. But still we see a steady movement in the Church, in the Catholic Church, towards a broader acceptance of the scientific idea of evolution. Other, less hierarchical churches have fewer problems along the way. If you happen to be a Christian watching this video and you're unsure about what your own position on evolution should be, first of all, know that there are a range of different positions on this. However, most people in the world who identify as Christian also feel no need to challenge the science of evolution. Most Christians see no conflict here. Anyway,